Oh, hold on. Hold that thought. Because what you're looking at right now from a creative perspective is the worst that Gen AI will ever be.
That is true. That is true. What are some of the things in the Gen AI space that you think are really important for marketers to pay attention to now?
And the challenge is we've fragmented things way too much. We've made it incredibly complex.
Every marketer has various channels, various platforms, different asset types, digital and non-digital, and different agencies. So the whole data ecosystem is like super fragmented. There's no integration of the data.
How do you stop reinventing the wheel every time you bring in a new marketing resource or every time you bring on a new marketing partner? It's like no one has ever done this work before.
Being able to quantify the ROI of marketing.
How do you really drive efficiency through the organization so that marketing isn't the first thing to go when times get tight because they're not 100% sure quantifiably that this is the right thing, this is what defines my business. Mark my words, there is a Gen AI bubble right now that
Mhm.
exists. It's fomenting. We haven't hit the peak of it yet, but it is going to implode. Probably, I would say, probably 2026.
Hi, Kevin. Welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Let's start with your journey. Who is Kevin Wassong and what's your journey?
Well, first of all, Arpit, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Um, my journey has been in marketing and technology for most of my career. I started in digital in the 90s, taking companies like the US Marines and Unilever, Merrill Lynch, De Beers online. One of my favorite stories was out of the global budget for Merrill Lynch, I had a full $80,000 to usher them into the digital age at that time. So I've built technology. At that time, it was not about banner ads. That was a very small portion of it. It really was about building their web presence, their strategy, and the things that they were doing. That evolved into building a few different companies. One which was a good exit, the first private marketplace for mobile advertising that was sold to Nexstar Broadcasting as part of the roll up of a lot of the disparate stations, broadcast stations across the US. That led me to really diving in and building marketing.ai, which really is the technology I've always wanted to build. This is the one, and I've known it for a long time, and now we've arrived.
Right. So now you're the founder of marketing.ai, which is a technology platform for marketers. And you've always built technology stuff for marketers. Ever since I've known you for more than a decade, you've been building technology for marketers. Why is it different right now? Like, what is the challenge that the marketers have, and how did this idea come about? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So throughout my career, the thing that's really been interesting, and one of my, I think it's just a funny story, was I was at an event probably about 6 months ago, and a guy put his arm on my shoulder as we were talking to a group of people, and he said, "This is one of the guys that created this mess." And I, and I didn't know whether to be insulted or be flattered from it. And it was in the context was essentially that the rise of social media, the rise of digital advertising, the rise of OTT and direct to consumer marketing, that all of this stuff has come about during my career. And I've been involved in watching it happen. And in many instances, actually creating a lot of it. And the challenge is we've fragmented things way too much. We've made it incredibly complex. We've also made a lot of people incredibly wealthy in doing it, whether it was DoubleClick, which was really the ad serving infrastructure that was acquired by Google to create Google Ads, or whether it was social media and the advent of Facebook really being the catalyst and the growth for social media. All of these things have made the marketers um, their essentially their role exceptionally difficult, and it's made CEOs actually it's made their roles more difficult primarily because they're now at a stage of hiring people who came from one side or the other in terms of marketing. They either came from the digital side, or they came from the brand side, or they came from the media side. It's a multi-sided universe, and that's a real struggle for companies today. How do you bring all of this back together in a holistic way? Number one. Number two, how do you make marketing evolutionary, not revolutionary? How do you stop reinventing the wheel every time you bring in a new marketing resource or every time you bring on a new marketing partner? It's like no one has ever done this work before. And then the final part is how do you really drive efficiency through the organization so that marketing isn't the first thing to go when times get tight because they're not 100% sure quantifiably that this is the right thing. This is what defines my business. So, those are kind of the three things that have come together in a way that allow us to focus on creating a technology that helps solve this really bizarre dynamic that's evolved over the last 20 years.
Wow, that's amazing. I think if we can solve these three problems, like you said, right? Marketers' world is extremely fragmented. Marketing is extremely fragmented. So every marketer has various channels, various platforms, different asset types, digital and non-digital, and different agencies. So the whole data ecosystem within a marketer's lifetime is like super, super fragmented. There's no integration of the data. So that's one of the challenges that we're trying to solve. The next is marketing has become this, every few months, every few years you do something revolutionary, and there is no context of what worked, what did not work in the past, and can we build on top of it. Instead, a new CMO comes or a new marketer comes and tries to reinvent the brand and tries to do something radically different without actually using any of the experience of the past. And that has been a big challenge, that people are not able to build upon their successes. In fact, always trying to recreate stuff, always trying to be in the hustle instead of enjoying the success that they've had in the past, and building on top of it. And the third thing was being able to quantify the ROI of marketing, which is a big challenge. I've seen this myself with many companies that we have been working with, that the CEO and the CMO always have the struggle, because the CMO is trying to justify the ROI of the marketing, and the CEO is trying to figure out, do we need to optimize, what do we need to do we need to cut costs, or there's a constraint on the budget all the time. And can we solve these three things? I think if we can solve these three things, that's like a marketer's dream. And
I
the
think it's a marketer's dream, and that the crazy thing about it, and I'm probably butchering the quote a little bit, but Steve Jobs said, you have to connect the dots of the past to kind of figure out the future, and
right.
that's not happening in marketing today. And it's not only that, but the other dynamic that's unfolded from marketing is um, you saw over the last decade really this rise of performance marketing. And performance marketing is all about tricks to clicks. That's what it's all about. How do we get a consumer to click on something to buy something? That is one component of marketing. And as a matter of fact, last year, Nike fired their CEO and CMO because they chased direct to consumer and they chased the tricks to clicks to get somebody to buy a product versus building some kind of affinity for their brand. There has to be a middle ground between this performance marketing and brand. It has to exist. And that's where the industry as a whole, the marketing industry as a whole, has been in this kind of no man's land. It's kind of interesting. If you drive from the US to Canada, like if you're going to Montreal,
Yeah.
there's this space between the two countries that literally is like this no man's land. It's a road that's maybe a quarter of a mile long, and it doesn't really belong to anybody. I mean, it does obviously, but that's where we've been sitting right now. So one side is performance marketing, one side is brand marketing, and CFOs and CEOs have been like, oh, we're going to go with performance right now. What they didn't realize is what it would do to their brand. And so I'm a firm believer in brand. And I feel like we needed to create something that allows a marketer to wrap their heads around everything the consumer sees, understand if it's working or not working, so that they can adapt and adopt and evolve and improve their overall marketing. And at the same time, remain consistent with what their story is about. What is that thing that makes you say, I want to wear that Nike hat or I want to wear this marketing.ai hat? What is it about this brand that makes me want to be part of that community?
Right. So quantifying the ROI, this is even more difficult to. So it's still easy to quantify some sort of an ROI for performance marketing, because you got all these metrics. But for a brand initiative, if a company spends millions of dollars on rebranding or just branding and content for branding and so on and so forth, how do you justify the ROI for that? Even more difficult. But I understand what you're building has a direct implication to that. So let's talk a little bit about what we are building with marketing.ai, right? So especially let's talk about data fragmentation and how we solve that with data fragmentation. Obviously there is too much data out there. Everybody is collecting data. There are all these platforms. Every platform is generating all this data. So what's your view on why is that a problem for the marketer, and uh, how is AI going to impact that? Because I see everybody talking about generative AI all the time. We are in this business, and you know, with generative AI, the amount of creatives that we're going to see in the world are going to magnify many folds, because there are going to be too many more creatives. People are generating more, not only using the creative teams, but also now using AI. So that's going to blow up the whole data ecosystem altogether. So how does that impact data fragmentation, and how you're thinking about solving that?
So I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the CEO of one of the actually the largest agency holding companies, digital arm. You can guess who it is. And he's like, I really like your technology, but what happens when we're producing thousands of pieces of creative on a weekly basis? Now, in my head, I wanted to say, that's horrible for the consumer. I mean, it's really horrible for the consumer. Only 14% of consumers today say they're okay with advertising. Advertising has a bad reputation right now. It's just a lot of white noise. Um, and my response to him was not that, but it was, I don't care. And he was shocked. He's like, why don't you care? I said, because I'm going to tell you which of those 1,000 ads are actually working with the consumer. Let's start with the fact that marketing.ai was designed to capture what the consumer sees. We're not a dam. So don't confuse us with a dam. A dam to me is about the asset creation and the pieces that go into that asset that get that asset to the starting line. That's what a dam is about. We're about what did the consumer see and did it work with them? That's number one. Number two is with data fragmentation. You have let's take four channels. Let's take Google Ads. Let's take Facebook. Let's take Reddit, and let's take LinkedIn. From a digital perspective, I'll hold off on the non-digital stuff. Just from a digital perspective, if you were to run the same ad across those four platforms are going to have different measures of success, different KPIs. So the way that they measure success is going to be different. Two, the way that they manage and optimize the assets, which they believe is their secret sauce, is going to be different. They all have their own flavors of AI, from Gemini to, OpenAI or ChatGPT or Anthropic or whatever, Grok for X. All these different flavors of AI are designed to make the channel better and to optimize in the channel to get the performance out of the channel. That's creating more chaos for marketers. So, what we do, and it's funny because people are like, oh, that sounds so simple. And I'm like, it really isn't. Is we realized let's use color to normalize performance data. So, if I'm running an ad on Google, on Facebook, on Reddit, and LinkedIn, if the KPIs are all different, but I'm beating my KPIs, let's turn that ad a shade of green based on how well it's beating its KPIs. Conversely, if it's completely missing, let's turn it red. We had one agency manager who was responsible for Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn look at our platform and you could see his body relax, the sigh of relief of being able to look at it and just see green or red and know that, okay, now I can go in and I can start to play around with the levers and diagnose what needs to change within the platforms themselves to make this work much better. So we use color to normalize the performance data. That's the second thing that we do. The third thing is, and this was the real, to me, this is the real, I won't call it secret sauce, but it's what makes us different, is that we've known and we've realized that there is no taxonomy or structure for marketing that exists in the marketplace that's creative first. Many marketers will say back to me, yeah, there is. And I'll say, yes, there is. But it's applied to media. It's applied to the impressions. It's in the form of media mix modeling. And what is that? That's essentially using or using AI or looking at data through the lens of the ad impression. And an impression is nothing more than just a space. That's
Yeah,
all an impression is.
can you help clarify the impression versus the creative? Like when a marketer is looking at it,
Yep.
like for a lot of people, it was like, yeah, it's a creative, it got an impression, but then what's the difference when looking at it from the data lens?
So you can look at it from the impression side of this space reached this person at this time in this place and achieved this result. What's missing from that whole equation is what is actually this? We're approaching it from the creative side. So somebody saw this piece of creative, which caused some kind of reaction. And then we're able to look across all the media placements and see if it worked across all of that. Because whether it's McKinsey, Forrester, Gartner, Nucleus, any of these companies have proven time and time again when you integrate the messages and you build on top of the messages and you orchestrate your marketing and communications from a creative perspective, you see increases of 15 to 20% in performance. That's where you have the greatest success. Right now, everyone is chasing clicks. Stop chasing clicks and impressions and start making impressions with better creative. That's what we're all about. So it's approaching it from a different direction.
Yeah, so it's basically people are too connected to the outcome, and the outcome is the impression, outcome is the click. But what got them to the click, people are completely missing that. And if you don't know what got you to the click, how will you replicate that and how will you get the next click or the next impression? So basically, what you're saying is before you do the analytics on the outcome, you need to understand what is going into that space so that you can build on top of it and do more of what works and less of what doesn't work. And that so you said one very interesting thing, right? We are helping, which is the core of marketing.ai, which is normalizing by color. So it is a famous saying, I've heard you say it many a times, that 50% of all marketing is wasted. We don't know which 50%. That's a big problem for every marketer. And now we're solving that by telling the marketer exactly what's working and what's not. And we're doing that very easily by making a creative asset, the asset that the creative team produce, the actual ad, either a red or a yellow or a green. So we tell you exactly what is working, what is not working. It's not that I got X amount of CTR or X amount of impressions. That's probably the formula that turns it red, yellow, or green. But then what is working? When a CMO asks what is working, what is not, there is a very clear answer now of what is working, what is not. That's amazing.
There's, yeah, there's two things I want to add to that, and one is that marketers a lot of times when I'm talking to potential clients, they'll come back and say, well, we can do that within Facebook. I'm like, yeah, and you can also do it within LinkedIn, and you can also do it within Google, and you can also do it with your television and your print and your out of home. But what you're not doing, to that Steve Jobs quote, is connecting the dots. What's happening is the platforms are actually diluting your brand and diluting the message, because what they're doing is they're optimizing to their particular platform, to their algorithm, to their audience. How do you start to recognize things that are working more universally across all of those platforms? As a CMO, you have to have the subjectivity to look across those platforms and say, I understand that that's getting us real performance, but that's not what I want to say about my brand. That's not the message that I want to convey. So, you as a CMO, as a marketer, need to get to that point where you are the arbiter of that balance, where you start to do that. And you need the tools to be able to do that and recognize it. And that's exactly what we're providing.
Yeah, or even the other way around. Looks like people are really clicking with this message, with that message, with this podcast, with this style of branding that we put out. Maybe we need to adopt more of it. So define the brand using what people are able to connect with. So either ways, but it's important, like you said, the data is fragmented. We need to look at the holistic picture. What are people looking at across all platforms, not stick to only one platform, because your audiences are across everywhere, and your customer, before the customer actually converts and buys something, there's probably a journey. The customer is looking at an ad on Google and looking at a billboard outside and then watching a TV spot and then eventually going on the website. So you need to be able to understand all those touch points and how is the consumer behaving across all those touch points. then understand how the conversion is happening, what's your funnel look like, how many people are actually converting, and then be able to tie back the actual sales, the actual conversion into the whole holistic, like the people who watch these kind of ads on these kind of platforms, and this is how they perform, and what does that correlate to in terms of conversion. And that will give us the last of the 3 points that you had, which was how do you justify the ROI of marketing.
Yep.
And only when you can connect the conversion to the whole of the marketing, not just any one channel.
There's the other point I wanted to make to what you said, where you talked about the Wanamaker quote. So Wanamaker was the guy who said 50% of my advertising is wasted. I just don't know which 50% is. That there's a certain serendipity in marketing. And I used to have clients call me when we were first, building this kind of digital age, who would say, "Hey, can you create a viral video for me?" And I would say to them, "I don't know. Can you capture lightning in a bottle for me? Because I no, it's not possible." Um, as a matter of fact, when you think about the viral videos that were out there, viral videos went viral because the marketers spent millions of dollars advertising the video. That's how viral videos became viral videos. One of the most famous case studies in marketing, which also helped in terms of formulating the idea, is a woman named Susan Boyle. If you go back and look at Susan Boyle, it became one of the most viral videos of all time. She was like an America's Got Talent or London's Got Talent contestant who sang. She looked like everybody's nanny, and all of a sudden, when she started singing, it was just unbelievable. Well, that video blew up around the globe. And you know how much money was made off of that video? Zero. Nothing. Because nobody was able to capitalize on the velocity of that video taking off.
Hmm.
The same can be said for advertising. You'll create a message sometimes. An influencer may create a message sometime. As a marketer, you want to be able to see those messages that your consumers have seen, that for some reason they're responding to, and that speaks to the serendipity of marketing. You don't know whether something's going to work or not. I mean, a lot of work goes into getting to that starting point, but oftentimes some things happen that we just don't understand why. And then how do you build on top of that? That's that evolution versus revolution side of things. So, that is part of our technology.
That's amazing. So, looks like the most important role of AI in marketing is not going to be really creating new assets. It's going to be making sure we are able. It's going to be understanding how those assets impact your marketing. How do these assets create more impressions or conversions or clicks or whatever you're trying to track, and being able to understand why is it that an asset is able to create that impact. Why is it that a video is able to go viral? And using that as a basis to create an evolution of that, learn from that, and make new assets that are able to do more and make your marketing more evolutionary. That makes sense.
Everyone is obsessed with Gen AI at the moment. There's been a 16,000% increase in Gen AI companies in less than 5 years. It's a staggering number of Gen AI companies. So I would say this, and mark my words, there is a Gen AI bubble right now that
Mhm.
exists. It's fomenting. We haven't hit the peak of it yet, but it is going to implode. Probably, I would say, probably 2026. There will be great Gen AI solutions out there. Then there's applied AI, and we've had a lot of discussions about this, and I think a lot of people are ignoring applied AI and the capability and what it's able to do, which is essentially what you were talking about, going in and looking at, a use case. We turned on our technology for a national retailer that has over 1,000 stores. And I asked their CMO, how many creative assets do you think you have in this particular instance? This was one channel. It was Meta. And they said, I don't know, a few thousand. I said, 5 million. You have 5 million. And they were shocked. They were shocked. They didn't realize how much they had. I said, and how many insights have you garnered from those 5 million so that you can build on the success? The answer is zero. What we're enabling them to do, especially with applied AI, is start to extract insights. We actually call, rather than an email that you subscribe to, have been calling it insight extraction. Part of what we're doing for clients is really driving insight extraction so that they can make better decisions about their marketing. We
Yeah,
think that that's where the business is going.
that's amazing. So that one example, right? A brand that has 1,000 retail stores, in one channel they have 5 million assets. Now imagine that those 5 million assets, they are from eternity, they're like from the last 20 years, just last 10 years worth of data of those 5 million assets, and 365 days a year. So that's like, if even if you track daily data, that's like 18 billion data points in just one channel. And then you have Google, LinkedIn, Reddit, Twitch, YouTube, all these channels. And then you have non-digital channels. Each of the 1,000 stores have signage, they have in-store advertising, they have TV spots, they have newspaper and magazine advertising. Just imagine, and each of these have historical data, right, for the last 10, 15 years or whatever the stores have been operating for. So that's like billions of data points, and people are not able to capitalize on it. Every time you're trying to take a decision on what should be my next creative, a bunch of people are in a conference room trying to scratch their heads and trying to bring something up based on half-baked spreadsheets and Tableau reports, and trying to figure out how do we create a new creative that's going to do well, instead of looking at those billions of data points and being able to inform their next creative asset based on that data. It's amazing.
You make a really important point there, and I oftentimes will tell people we're not called advertising.ai, we're called marketing.ai, because you have to be looking at all of those consumer touch points. And we started as a technology, we really started with the lens of retail, because retail has the most consumer touch points. If you think about omni-channel retail, has the most consumer touch points of any marketing ecosystem. It's much easier to peel back layers than it is to add to it from a technology architecture standpoint. So we built that, what we're calling that AI marketing model as the foundation. So, we talk about three things. We talk about organizing, or the ability to organize all your creative assets. That's really important, and to be able to share those things across an ecosystem. The ability to analyze, that's really where the AI comes in applied AI, in at two levels. First of all, being able to look at the creative assets themselves and break it down into what the asset is made up of. What was this video made up of? What was this static image made up of? What is the metadata around it? Because now, if you can make that correlation between that piece of creative and the performance metrics, the KPIs, this consistently beats it, you can start to then optimize over time, or provide insights that come back and say, hey, when you have a woman walking on a beach with a dog drinking a cup of coffee, that tends to work against this particular audience. You might want to think about creating assets that have that kind of makeup,
Mhm.
things to that degree. That's where we'll get to, but that is a function of having that organization, then getting to the analysis, and then ultimately getting to the optimization. So we're on that journey, and we're excited to be working with different marketers who want to be on that journey with us.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about non-digital assets, right? When we're talking about the complete journey
Yeah.
of a consumer, going back to the same retail example, right? Somebody watches a bunch of ads on Facebook and YouTube and whatever, right? And that we can measure because we know what is the impression, clicks, CTR, CPC, all these metrics are being given out by these platforms. But then somebody really got a flyer in the mail,
Yep.
or they saw a sign on the shop while they were walking in the market, and that's what triggered them to go in and convert and buy something from that retail store. How can a marketer measure that with this technology? So let's talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
That is a very difficult challenge to figure out what works and what doesn't work. But in my career, I've worked with clients where we have done exactly that, where it's in essence, it's almost like A/B testing in the digital universe, where you're putting non-digital assets into the marketplace that has, let's take a market that has a similar demographic profile to another market. And if you're doing an A/B test, if I put up this window cling in this market and I don't put it up in this market, and I understand I had an increase in sales of product here and I didn't have it here, well, okay, now we're getting to something that worked. So that is much more qualitative in measure. There's other qualitative measures that marketers go through as well. For example, research reports that are attitude and awareness studies about their brand. You're going to see a much more of a prevalence of those. As a matter of fact, Kantar, which was a WPP division, was sold to a private equity firm for over $1 billion yesterday. So you're seeing a big a prevalence of importance being put on being able to quantify the things that we're talking about right now. So, us being able to plug in those research reports, which are qualitative in nature, ultimately to our technology, and for marketers to take the time to simply decide whether a creative asset that they put into market was good or bad. There's a lot of anecdotal and directional information there. But if you capture that over time, you're gonna just become much more successful in terms of what your marketing is doing. And I'll give you one example. We spoke to a CMO of a major retailer in the U.S., a women's brand, and she said, I've been with this company for 25 years, and I do photo shoots twice a year. And I know that I'm recreating assets that I've created before. And I said, well, could you find those assets? And she said, no, I really can't. They either lived with the agency that we were working with that we're no longer working with, or an independent person that we're no longer working with, or maybe I can find them in my computer somewhere. I said, okay, well, that's point number one. Point number two is, if you found the asset, would you know if it worked or not? She said, well, I would know because it's my historical knowledge,
Mhm.
but there'll be no data there that quantifies that that worked. Okay, well, if you save that asset that you know a consumer saw in our system and you give it a ranking from excellent to good to average to poor to low, if you save that in the system, now you have something directional to go back and reference over time. So, non digital, which also, by the way, represents for most brands more than 30% of their advertising spend, even today,
Yeah.
is a prime example. And advertising only represents 50% of a marketer's spend. The other 50% is on non digital, retail, the store, all the other things that marketers do.
So for non-digital, one of the things, so you said two things. One is there is a qualitative measure using research reports and audience groups and all of that, focus
Yep.
groups and whatnot. But then quantitatively, we can correlate that to the sales data, and we can say, when I put up this kind of a flyer, our sales for that week goes up because we have the sales conversion data, we have the point of sales data, we have all of that. So we can kind of do some level of correlation there.
Yep.
Um, is there ever a correlation, or does that make sense? I'm sure we will do this, we are on that journey to that research, but have you thought about, is there a correlation between when I put up this billboard up, or when I give this ad in the newspaper, in that week my Facebook advertising performs in a certain way, or my YouTube advertising performs in a certain way, and can that insight be used, that correlation be used to measure the performance of the non-digital asset?
So right now, and going back to the agencies and what the media agencies and what they're doing with media mix modeling is they're using AI and they're using large data models to do exactly what you're talking about from a media perspective.
Hmm.
What we're doing is saying from a creative perspective, you're going to be able to do this. They're not doing that today. And that
Right.
is a major, major opportunity for marketers. We're not there yet. We're going to get there. And
Right.
we've built that structure and that taxonomy to do exactly what you're talking about. But that is, as one potential investor put it, you know, you guys might be the holy grail of advertising or the holy grail of marketing if you execute. If you execute is that key statement there. And I think that we've done a great job of executing with our team so far.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are billions of data points in the digital sphere, which is a fraction of the spend, and then the other fraction is the non-digital spend, which is very, there is a lack of data points there, but then there is a correlation of time with the digital assets and with the sales data, and that's how we measure the performance of. Quantitatively, we can measure the performance of the non-digital assets.
Yep.
That's great. Let's talk about GenAI is a bubble. You said GenAI is a bubble is going to implode in 2026. What are some of the things in the GenAI space that you think are really important for marketers to pay attention to now? Because yeah.
Uh, Number one is going to be the application of Gen AI to the channels that they're marketing in: Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, all of these channels. And what I mean by that is that they're going to have the ability, like you do in your Gmail account right now, to use Gen AI to rewrite your email. You can simply do that with one click. What's going to happen in the platforms, the ad platforms, is that they're going to focus on optimizing to their platform. That's going to be both good and bad. There's going to be positive results in terms of performance in the individual platform.
Hmm.
But what marketers are going to do is they're going to lose sight of what is actually being shown or said to their consumers and to the audience that they're going after. They're not going to have the lens to that unless they use marketing.ai. We're going to provide that lens to them. But that is going to be the biggest challenge for marketers by far. And, the other thing that Gen AI is doing right now, which is really, I think, it's both an opportunity and it's a real cause for concern, is what I call the erosion of trust. In that it's very, very difficult to decipher what's real
Hmm.
any longer. As a matter of fact, oftentimes you could be talking to someone on a call, a service call to a credit card company, and I was on a call actually the other day, and my wife said, "Are you real?" to the person, and the person said, "Yes, I am real." And so it was that, but that is kind of like a microcosm of the challenge that marketers are going to face. I'll say this, this is really interesting. And we have a heavy focus out of the gate on retail, on omnichannel retail. And here's why: consumers want to see, touch, and feel.
Hmm.
They like, you will order products. How many people order? Raise your hand if you order products. I know we're on a podcast right now. There is no raising your hand. Raise your hand if you order products from Amazon and you order multiples of different products, and then you get those products and then you return the ones that you don't like. Yeah, everybody does it. I do have a belief that that is very much unsustainable
Hmm.
because, first of all, you're paying for it somewhere. There's a cost in there somewhere that you're paying for.
Yeah.
There's a couple of really interesting stats. Starbucks is opening 55,000 stores over the course of the next, I don't know, whatever number of years. Essentially, they're opening 8 new stores a week. Target in the United States is opening 50 new stores in the United States. Warby Parker has more retail stores than Brooks Brothers today. These are companies that, and I say Warby Parker in particular was a online disruptor. That was their business. Now they have more retail stores than Brooks Brothers. What does that tell you about consumers? What does that tell you about business? What does that tell you about trust? You want to be able to look, touch, feel, see the products before you do it. That goes to omnichannel. Now, that doesn't mean that the consumer experience, when we talk about omnichannel, won't be going to a store to check something out and see, oh, I really do like that. Now I'm going to go back online and I know that I have the comfort in ordering it online. I can go ahead and do that. Marketers need to build a trust in consumers. They need to tell a more cohesive story. They have to connect with people at a much deeper level. That's what's missing from marketing. Again, chasing clicks, tricks for clicks. We're not that's not the business. You're here to build a relationship with consumers. Build a relationship.
Right, right, right. So I think so. My question was, what's the biggest risk, or what's the thing that you take care of in Gen AI? What are the things that you should be careful about, or what is it that marketing should be focused on in terms of Gen AI? And I think you put it right. So erosion of trust is a big risk if you use generative AI and generative models incorrectly, and you start creating tone deaf content in order to chase impressions. You lose trust quickly. I have seen so many, AI generated images and text pieces online all the time. You
Yep.
look at it and you know it's AI generated. It
Of course.
doesn't feel authentic. It feels very fake, and you don't even feel like reading it.
Oh, hold on. Hold that thought. Because what you're looking at right now from a creative perspective is the worst that Gen AI will ever be.
That is true. That is true. But also, what the marketers need to look at is use Gen AI, but use it like a tool. So back in the day when there was no Photoshop, people would hand draw stuff and that would be a creative. And then tools came around and there is Photoshop and there are all these, tools from Adobe and different companies. And now you use those tools to create AI, create a media piece of creative. And now this is a new tool which has come out, Gen AI. Obviously, you need people to understand how to use the tool and use it well. Otherwise, you're going to create a crappy output. So the same is the case with Photoshop. If somebody doesn't know how to use it well, they're going to produce a crappy output. Same is the case with Gen AI. So people have to understand how to use it, educate themselves, train themselves. It's not going to happen on day one. Your output is not going to be amazing. The tools are getting better, the mods are getting better, and your people who are going to use it are going to get better. And
Yep.
eventually, it's going to be a great tool in your arsenal to use to create the things that you want to create. Don't let it loose, but fine tune it on the billions of data points that you have, and you can fine tune your Gen AI models to align with your brand, your guidelines, your kind of assets that work and don't work, and use that to create an evolutionary creative that evolves on top of it, learns from everything that your brand stands by and has performed, and then creates based on that. So basically, it's a tool. Use it well, and it's going to go well.
I wonder whether I want to ask whether you agree with what I'm about to say. Because when I talked about the Gen AI bubble, just kind of building on that, I think that, if you think about OpenAI started in 2015. It's not a new company. It was really in stealth for a long period of time. And I like
Yeah.
to say it was just openly reading the internet. Even though they say they weren't, that's BS. They were openly reading the internet for the last 8 years until I think Elon Musk probably outed them in some way because they were talking about going, not being a non for profit. And at that point, he's like, okay, this is going to be a real problem. But if you think about it, and we were having a discussion this morning, and Anil talked about data lakes, and I said, we're talking about a data ocean, that the Gen AIs of Google, of LinkedIn, of Meta, of Amazon, of OpenAI, the others to a certain extent, not as much, those are pure data oceans. They're data universes. As a matter of fact, I own a URL called the Data Atmosphere. And the idea was that essentially there's so much data flying around us in the universe that there is a data atmosphere that exists. And how do we tap into the data atmosphere? The reason I said there's a bubble is that I don't think there's any way to catch up to what OpenAI or Google or any of these platforms have done because we didn't know that, you know, behind the scenes, the depth and breadth of data that Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all these companies have is a data atmosphere. It's endless. And so their ability for their Gen AI to Gen AI itself and make itself better is essentially becoming sentient in many ways is a bit of a fait accompli. So that's why I talk about these other Gen AI tools that pop up, which are all really cool. But the reality is, I could probably put a prompt into OpenAI saying, "Hey, I want to create a Gen AI tool that does this," and it will do it for me.
So I have three things, right? I kind of agree, but not agree with you in one area. So I'll explain that, right? One thing that you said is like it's a bubble. There are too many companies coming up around Jenny. I kind of agree there. A lot of companies are just putting together the same set of APIs, the similar kind of logic, and everybody's thinking now we have a Gen AI product, we're going to market that. A lot of companies are raising a ton of money, and every time OpenAI or Google does a new release, a bunch of them die because now that is a native feature in OpenAI. So this goes back to building any startup. You have to think about what is your product market fit, what is the product that you're trying to build, does it have long term viability. Is it sustainable to build a product like this? Do you have a differentiation, right? And is this going to be sustainable in the long run? So that's just a factor of, every year, every wave, you have so many companies that are built. Some of them survive, which are really differentiated, and that's going to be the same case here. Like when internet happened, when mobile happened, when social media happened, when a lot of these waves happened, there were many companies that were created. Only a few survived and came up to the top. So there will be similarly in the AI space. There will be some $1 trillion companies, some $100 billion companies, some $1 billion companies, some $10 million companies. There's going to be a range, and some of them will die and get merged and get acquired. Some people
Yep.
will leave and go and join the other companies. So that is definitely for sure. The other thing which you said is also very interesting, that all these big companies, one of the big reasons that the big companies are winning at the game of AI is because they have this massive pool of data that they have access to, right? Google, for example, scrapes the entire internet because it's a search engine. It has to do that. It's their job to index the internet, right? And now they have indexed the internet, they have access to the entire internet. Obviously they don't just go and consume everything. They have rules around what they can consume or not, but they have access to the entire internet. They have
Mhm.
access to Gmail, YouTube, all these amazing services that have more than a billion users, billion active users. I was reading that Google has like more than 9 services that have more than billion active users. And guess what? If that service is free, if you are not paying for the product, then you are the product. If you're not paying to use YouTube, that is because you are the product. They're using their data to do what they like to do, to advertise to you, to train their models and whatnot, right? So they have access. All these big companies are winning because they have access to so much data, which kind of brings me to my point that every company has a ton of data. People just don't know it yet, right?
Yes.
For example, that retailer that we were talking to, billions of data points, they don't know it yet. They
Yes.
can use that they can use that as their strength to train their AI model so that they can win in the future, right?
Yes.
So that's the second part. But the third thing that you said was that GenAI can probably create new stuff and probably create new GenAI solutions. I kind of disagree with that. And here is an experiment that I want you to do, and I want anybody who's watching to do as well. Type on chat gpt. So chat gpt, if you have a pro or a premium subscription, you can create images using DALI 3 on chat gpt.
Yep.
Try and type, draw me a watch face that shows 6:30 p.m. It will not know how to do it because all the watch faces in the world that it has been trained to are 10 past 10. That is the most beautiful watch face, and everybody kind of uses that image. So it will always create an image that is 10 past 10. It will not be able to create any other time. Or ask it to do, draw me a birthday cake that has a candle which is not lit. It will not be able to do it because all the birthday cake images in the world have a candle which is lit, right? Or draw me an image of a person writing with their left hand or eating with their left hand. Now that is such an uncommon situation. 90% of the people are right handed. So it really cannot draw that. It really cannot come up with that visual. What does that tell me? That tells me that it is extremely hard for GenAI to create new stuff. It is really good at surfacing the stuff that it has learned from, and then using that to create something based on what it already knows, based on what already exists in the training data set. But if you wanted to do something brand new, which it has never seen, which the world has never seen, that's going to be super, super hard for us to reach there, for us to reach that state of AGI. That's probably when AGI will happen. But that's what the state of the AI is right now. It cannot really create new stuff. It's great at memorizing a whole bunch of stuff and coming up with stuff based on what it knows from that memory, but really not creating new stuff. So
By the way, are you sure that time in the world just hasn't stopped and it's just permanently 10:10?
that's a good point. I don't know yet. Maybe it is.
Because I actually just went on to ChatGPT and asked it to create it at 6:30, and it gave me a watch face with 10:10.
Yeah, it will probably write 610 somewhere on the corner, but the watch face would always be 1010. So every large language model or every AI model essentially has two main aspects, two main dimensions. It has the memory and it has the capability. The capability is what you want to use, and that goes for any tech team, anybody who's trying to use AI. More important is how you use the capability of the model, And then how do you augment its memory with your proprietary data that only you have? And that's how you win, right?
And
Because
that is the AI marketing model. If you create the AI marketing model for your business, if you're that retailer that has 5 million assets, creative assets in your one instance of, of Meta or LinkedIn or Reddit or, the trade desk, if you pull those in and the data along with it and start to build your own model, think about what you're going to be able to do from that.
that's amazing, Kevin. Great conversation, Kevin. I'm sure this what we are building with marketing.ai, it's an amazing technology, will help the marketers solve some of the core problems that we talked about. What's working, what's not, how do I make it work, how do I measure the impact of marketing, and so on and so forth. Any other questions, Kevin?
I was trying to go back and think of the first time I met you, and I was kind of searching through my calendars to find the first time that I met you, and I know it was well over it was I'm going to say it was 8 years ago, um, that we met, where we had talked about building this technology, and
Yeah.
now we're at that stage where we've done it, and we're definitely could not have done it without you. That's for sure. And I kept, it's funny. I tell there's an advisory board member that we have, a guy named Mike Dupuis, and Mike was the head of account services for Organic, yeah, which was a major digital agency, publicly traded at the time. And in '98, I called him and I said, "Hey, would you come and be our head of client services at JWT?" He's like, "Hey, Kevin, let me tell you something. My equity is worth seven figures. Will can you guys match that? That's what it's worth in the marketplace right now." And I was like, "No, there's no way we can match that. We can probably get close on salary. We can't match it on equity." And then the dot com bubble burst. And I called him. I said, "Hey, Mike." He goes, "When do you want me to start?" and, and the reason I tell you that story is, like, for years I was looking for that opportunity to work with you and work with your
Yeah.
team and your leadership and understanding and vision. And then it presented itself about a year ago, and here we are.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to be on this journey with you and the team and building this. And I know marketers are going to turn around and they're going to be like, "That's what we need." It's starting to happen now. We've had great presentations, but excited to be working with you.
Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to connect and we were able to make it work. I am very excited about where the product is headed. I think I absolutely agree with that potential investor that you talked about. This is probably going to be the holy grail of marketing. We're seeing a lot of traction. The product is coming out great. I'm excited where we're headed.
Awesome.
All right, Kevin, that's the part. Thank you.
Thanks.